we will call this meeting to order. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Myers, you could call the roll, please.
Jennifer Ashburn.
Here.
Mary Ann Baxter.
Here.
Abby Bemis.
Here.
Diane Corso.
Here.
Adriana Guerra. Billy Hill.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Mark Pfeiffer.
Here.
Tim Schwanger.
Here.
Elizabeth Semler.
Here.
Tom Shara.
Here.
Jennifer Torres.
Here.
Levada Wilson.
Here.
Mike Zuloff.
Here.
Very good. You have distributed to you the minutes from the May 13th meeting. Motion to approve.
Madam Chair, I move the approval of minutes as distributed.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good, motion carries. Next on our agenda would be public comment. I don't see anyone in attendance, so we will move on. And jump right into today's discussion items. So today we have a few items left that we had identified for revisiting and then circling back to items that have been previously tabled. First on our list to take a look at was section 45 of the charter, ballots. I think the last couple of meetings, we've gotten discussion going well by starting with a motion. So if there's an initial opinion that wants to be shared and/or starting with a motion, keep us moving.
I move no change.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none, Ms. Myers, if you could call the roll, please.
Jennifer Ashburn. Yes would be change. No would be we want a change.
Yes.
Mary Ann Baxter.
Yes. How many negatives?
Abby Bemis.
Yes.
Diane Corso.
Yes.
Alexandra Guerra.
Adriana Guerra.
Yes.
Billy Hill.
Yes.
David Miller. Mark Pfeiffer.
Yes.
Tim Schwanger.
Yes.
Elizabeth Semler.
Yes.
Tom Shara.
Yes.
Jennifer Torres.
Yes.
Levada Wilson.
Yes.
Mike Zuloff.
Yes.
Very good. Section 66, recall petitions.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Schwanger.
Yes, we want to discuss this first? I really don't, I guess I can make a motion for change, and if somebody wants to second it, then we can discuss what the change would be. Is that what you prefer?
That seemed to keep us moving a little faster.
Okay, yes. Okay, I'll make a motion that we change and then discuss.
What change would you like?
Well, the change would be, if everybody's read section 66, it's rather confusing and cumbersome. The Ohio Revised Code does provide an easier to follow, but it's the same type system, but it's easier to follow. I would propose that just the couple of sections be changed to follow Ohio Revised Code state law, not the entirety, but the part about petitions and sufficient petitions, change that section where it says it's got to be at the fire station for so many days and 10% over here and 15% over there. Like I say, the Ohio Revised Code makes it simpler to understand. I don't want to say it's easier to recall somebody, but it's just less
Cumbersome.
cumbersome.
Okay,
So I would probably want to know what the Ohio Revised Code says. in
Yes, and
replacement.
this motion, has it been seconded? Somebody- okay.
I would like clarification of the motion. I'm not clear on what the motion was.
Yes, there's a couple of, and I don't have it in front of me, I don't think. I put everything on my phone now, so
Do you want to look at this?
no, I can read it here, I think. Yeah, if you don't have section 66 in front of you, it says a petition for the recall of the city commissioner or city commissioners signed by at least 10% of the total number of persons voting at the last preceding municipal election. Then it says a statement of 200 words. Then if you get down a little further, it says 10% of the number of persons voting at the last preceding municipal election. Then it says the finance director has to do something, and copies of such petitions without signatures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The petition has to sit in the firehouse for so many days. It's very, very cumbersome, and I know we don't want to necessarily make things easier to recall a city commissioner, but it shouldn't be more restrictive than the Ohio Revised Code.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Zulhoff.
so, yeah, if nothing else, could use some updating, typewritten copies, firehouse. So maybe, and I'm kind of, turns out by default, we're kind of discussing it without a motion, which is fine because we need to gel a motion, I guess. But, yeah, I mean, why not? When I see typewritten copies, I mean, it's not that bad of a problem but copies, maybe it needs to be simplified and updated a bit. Might not be any big deal, might not be a substantive change, but I think, the gentleman's concern, has merit.
Mr. Schwanger, do you have the Ohio Revised Code language in front of you?
Yes, I do. So if we go with the section 66, the first paragraph, this is the Ohio Revised Code, a petition signed by qualified electors equal to the number of 15% of the total votes cast at the most recent regular municipal election, and demanding the election of a successor to the person sought to be removed shall be filed with the Board of Elections. A petition shall contain the required number of valid signatures upon submission to the Board of Elections. What this does, and I'll continue on, what this does is it takes out of the hands of the finance director, I think, is the one that right now is in charge of the recall petitions, and then it's got to go to the firehouse. A petition is not valid after 90 days from the date of this first signature. A petition shall contain a general statement in not more than 200 words of the grounds upon which the removal of the person is sought. The form, sufficiency, and regularity of any such petition shall be determined as provided in the general election laws, which, that would be the election board. The second part of this would be, again, this is Ohio Revised Code. If the petition is sufficient and the person whose removal is sought does not resign within 5 days after the sufficiency of the petition has been determined, and the election shall be held at the next primary or general election occurring more than 90 days from the date of the finding of the sufficiency of the petition. The election authorities, again, the Board of Elections, shall publish notice and make all arrangements for holding the election, which shall be conducted and the result thereof returned and declared in all respects as are the results of regular municipal elections. So if you compare that to what we have now, it's better understanding and it's not as cumbersome. And that's what I would like to make a motion to just take those sections out about petitions and then replace it with these two A and B, two sections.
So, Mr. Schwanger?
Yes.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. So you're proposing ORC Section 705.92?
Let me see, I think I had it written down here somewhere.
I think so.
Yes,
That-
yeah,
that's what I was
705
thinking.
yeah, 92,
Okay.
yes, I have it written down.
So
just-
705, 902, big A and big B would be
Yes.
what would supplant that?
Yes,
Madam Chair, would that include a change to 15% from 10%?
Mr. Schwanger, is that included in your motion?
yeah, yes.
I would second his motion as he just stated it.
Yes, that's 15% on here.
A motion and a second.
Now discussion.
Now continued discussion.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Millett.
if we looked at 66 and 67 as, we're going to get to 67 next, that talks about 15%. Isn't that sort of in the end of time, sort of where we get to anyway, 15%?
Because then this goes on to talk about how the nomination.
Should you just strike all of this
and replace
with Ohio Revised Code?
I don't know, I had trouble interpreting that.
Mr. Hastings, could you help us clarify?
Yeah, no, 66 and 67, and they differ from Ohio law. As I understand the motion, the motion is not to follow Ohio law, but to substitute the first two paragraphs of, will be Ohio Revised Code 705.92 in lieu of what we see here. So if Ohio law changes, we would still be under whatever this section says.
Currently.
Yes, yeah, right. We would just be replacing a couple of
Right,
paragraphs,
but it-
not the entire.
Yeah, 705.92 does have other paragraphs, how the candidates are to be nominated in the recall, the replacement candidates, and also how the ballot is to be worded is also in 705.92. Like Section D states the ballots of the recall election shall, with respect to each person whose removal is sought, submit the question, shall name a person be removed from the office of whatever their office is by recall.
And I think we already have that in our charter, maybe section 67, or there's more than, I think it does specify that on the ballot, it actually says yes to removing, no to removing.
Right, that's different than Ohio Revised Code.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not looking to change any of that. Or I'm not recommending that we change any of that. It's just a procedure that we use for collecting signatures.
Madam Chair, for clarification purposes, you're only talking about 66. You're not talking about 67, 68, or 69.
Correct.
Madam Chair, I'm wondering if we could consider combining 66, 67, 68, because it seems, if you're reading, and 69, if you're reading the Ohio Revised Code, it pretty much clarifies all of that, which would take some of the wordiness out of what is in the charter already.
That was not, Madam Chairman, that was really not my purpose.
I know, I'm trying to
Yeah.
discuss it now.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you want to combine them all?
Because the problem comes with the actual wording of how to gather signatures. Not how, not the rest of the three that are, subsequent, after that, okay? So, again, if you go back just to the gathering of signatures, it speaks about 10%, 15%, 200 words, fire station, finance director, it's all over the place. And what A and B of the Ohio Revised Code does is it fixes all that. It makes it simpler. Everything else, I don't, based on, again, talking to the community and going through a couple of recalls, okay, over the years, that was the biggest issue, was the gathering of signatures. Had nothing to do with the wording on, shall, on the ballot, shall this person be removed, yes or no? That was not an issue.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Zullo.
what if I move to table this until the next meeting so that we have time to
No, we have
think
to-
about it and to look at it in writing, because, I mean, it's being read to us. I'm not sure.
You know, we can give you a copy of the Ohio Revised Code section, how it's organized, and these 4 charter sections.
Because it's kind of fuzzy. I don't know how, maybe you guys are smarter than I am, but I'd have to look at it for a while to be clear on what I was voting on.
So we have 2 remaining meetings.
We have 2 remaining meetings. Next meeting, we have to formulate all the things that are going to go in your letter. The final meeting is your letter that's going to commission with your suggestions, and you sign. So by next meeting, we have to have all the language 100% down on all the items you're taking to commission. All your
At the end of
suggestions.
next meeting.
At the end of next meeting.
So it would be difficult to come back without a draft of some kind at the next meeting.
Well, we could, the language we need could be sent to us before the next meeting, but it was just a thought. I guess I'll make that a motion then, and we can decide if that's,
I do want to point out, in reading this, being the commission clerk, I see what they're doing by this language. They are designating and I don't know why they worded it differently. In the one, it says the finance director. In 67, it says the city treasurer, which would be the same person. I don't know why they selected to state that differently, but I would assume the reason it was given to that person is because I work for commission. They are my bosses. So if they wanted to remove a commissioner, it probably would be best for that petition to be given to someone other than me that works for all 7 of them. And then if you read on under the recall election, it states, after the finance director has posted that they want this person recalled, they have 5 days to resign. Instead of being publicly removed from their position, they have 5 days to resign, and that resignation is given to me, who I in turn notify the treasurer and the rest of them. So I see how they're doing that. I'm not saying it has to be done that way, but I'm seeing why they did that. But I'm not saying it has to be done that way.
Mr. Schwanger?
Well, that's, okay. The proposal I put forward takes you out of the equation and the finance director, and it sends it directly to the Board of Elections.
Well, I'm not in the equation until you get to number 68, which we've already said we're not changing.
Okay.
And 68 is where I'm part of the equation. Prior to that, I'm not part of the equation.
Mr. Hastings, can you help us with the 15% versus the 10% as it's currently written?
Yeah, under Ohio Revised Code, it's 15%. Under our charter, it's 10%. I mean, both are legal.
Okay.
Which one we choose is a matter of policy.
Okay.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm not sure how the finance director verifies the signatures on a petition, since those records are all kept at the Board of Elections. I know in one of the cities where I worked, which had similar language, they just referred it to the Board of Elections.
So we do have a motion on the floor for modifying section 66 to be more similar to the Ohio Revised Code, including upping the required number of signatures to 15%. And that has been seconded. Why don't, at this time, we call a roll on that, and there needs to be a modification.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. Could you please clarify, you're going to leave the first sentence in, Tim, and then stick the Ohio Revised Code, the first 2 sections in there, and remove the rest of the stuff in
No.
60? I'm not clear what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, let me bring this back up again.
A and B is what you said you wanted to insert. I'm just not sure what you're taking out of the current charter.
No, the very first second, or sentence, I'm sorry, is explanatory. You're looking for the electors of the city to, do the work. The problem that I'm trying to repair is from the word "a petition" for the recall, all the way down to the very last sentence, which again talks about 15%, 10%, hanging the petition at the fire station.
What last sentence? This one or that one?
Yeah, are you talking about the third paragraph or the
That
fourth?
one? Such petition?
Yeah, that's got to come out too. About the fire station, the very last, such copies of such petition shall remain on file in several places. That needs to come out too. That would come out. I guess my phone wasn't big enough to take that picture.
So after procedure all the way to such?
The changes, am I allowed to speak?
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Ms. Ashburn.
The changes that Tim wants to make, it doesn't change this at all. It just makes it easier to understand.
Correct.
Is that my understand, is that right?
15%.
That is his
And the
goal.
15% that changes,
Madam
right?
Chair.
That's up to you to
Makes it
decide.
harder.
Madam Chair, Mr. Schwanger, is it the only change that basically is that 10% where it says in here right now, other than simplifying the language, is the main change in numbers just going from 10% to what Ohio Revised Code says as 15?
No, the main change is not the 15% is not the main.
Okay, but is
Crux.
15% part of it as well?
I mean, if you guys want me to amend it to make it, to keep it 10%, that's fine. If that's what,
No, that's what I'm trying to clarify,
Yeah.
is because it's currently 10 in Ohio Revised
Right.
Code, and that section A says 15%.
right.
So I was trying to confirm if that's what part of
Yes, I
the
want to do the,
proposal-
my motion is to include the 15%.
Okay, that's why I wanted to make
Like I
sure.
Madam
said,
Chair,
Mr. Zulaf.
I would move to amend the motion to make it exactly the same, except leave the percent at 10%, because 15% would just make it harder to execute a recall. Someone
A second.
seconded it.
Second.
So we need to first vote on the amendment to the motion.
First vote on the amendment. Madam Chair, I would like to say something as well,
Please.
because I've actually run into litigation on this very
A and
issue.
B.
Note that there's one very subtle difference between the High Revised Code and our charter. The High Revised Code says
I can't hear him.
15% of the total votes cast at the previous election. Our charter says 10% of the total number of persons voting at the last preceding election. Some municipalities have taken the position when confronted by this language that first the Board of Elections has to determine who voted in the last election. They're the only ones eligible to sign a recall petition.
Oh, that is what it says.
Good research.
While the High Revised Code makes it clear that we're just talking about a number.
Can you ask him?
Madam
Okay,
Chair,
so-
point of order, did I hear a second on my motion to amend?
Yes. So currently, we need to vote on accepting the modification to the motion, keeping the current 10% level.
Wait, Madam Chair, I'm still confused. Are we striking the entire paragraph in section 66? Like striking it in its entirety after the first sentence? And replacing it?
That would be a no. All I'm proposing is to change the way the signatures are gathered, which is pretty much the entire paragraph. It says something about 200 words, it says.
Can you
some-
just read the area that you want to, like, so that we can have some context?
What it's going to be changed to?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of read part of it before, but you want me to read the entirety?
No,
Is that what you're
the
asking for?
parts that you want to strike out of the paragraph,
I did that, but I'll do it again.
or,
Not the Ohio Revised Code. I think she wants you to.
If I could offer a point of order here, could we, since this isn't discussion about the 15 versus 10%, maybe we should dispense with whether we're going to amend the motion or not before we get into the nitty-gritty of the rest of it.
So we will vote on the amendment, which would be to change the motion we're trying to clarify from 10%, from 15% to 10%. So
Madam Chair,
keeping
is-
10%.
Is that persons or of voters?
Well, it's currently written persons, but with Tim's motion, I believe you would be changing that, correct?
Sure.
Madam Chair, don't we have to, there's a motion on Tim's, and she just asked to have it clarified, which I understand it, what he wants to have taken out and put back in. That needs to be clarified, I believe, before anyone can place a vote.
Do we have any screens available to us during
Please,
this
not
meeting?
today.
Screens?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be easier, a visual. A visual, I can't contextualize what it
I
is.
understand. I'm trying to repeat it back, and I'm right there with you.
Just let me confused, how are we gonna vote on something that we're not clarifying?
Melanie's going to try to see if she
He
can
wants to
bring it
make
up.
it easier, like
Yeah.
200.
I do think,
Going to
I
the
do
fire department.
Tim, was
feel
it the
there's enough
whole
understanding.
second
Are we
It
paragraph?
stays the same, he just.
There's a modification to
Pretty
Tim's
much.
motion to take his original motion, which would have been 15%,
Okay.
to 10% as written in the charter. Can we vote on that? And then we'll move on to the specifics of his motion and whether we'd like to accept those. We have to get both motions cleared.
So this would be staying to the original 10%. A yes would be yes, staying with the 10%. A no would be thinking we're going to go to 15%.
Right.
Jennifer Ashburn,
No.
Mary Ann Baxter,
No.
Abby Bemis,
Yes.
Diane Corso,
No.
Adriana Guerra,
No.
Billy Hill,
Yes.
David Miller,
Yes.
Mark Pfeiffer,
Yes.
Tim Schwanger,
Yes.
Elizabeth Semler,
Yes.
Tom Sherrod,
Yes.
Jennifer Torres,
Yes.
Levada Wilson,
Yes.
Mike Zuloff.
Yes.
So it will be amended to keep with the original 10%.
That's what you want on there.
Yeah, they want to be able to put that.
I just asked Tim if he meant to strike the whole second paragraph to insert the Ohio Revised Code in there, and I believe you said yes?
Yes.
And part of the third.
A and B, right? Code section.
Part of the third, too, right?
That's what I was trying to clarify.
I know.
They might want, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
It's the whole thing.
Thank you. Is it possible, so you're able to pull up the 705?
Yeah, I can't see this.
70592?
Come up.
How, Madam Chair?
It's possible to see it at the screen.
If we're striking the middle paragraph and replacing with the Ohio Revised Code, the Ohio Revised Code says 15%, but we just voted to keep it at 10. So it would be an amendment to the Ohio Revised Code.
Yes, it would be using the Ohio Revised Code language and keeping the 10% level.
Okay.
And I do think that's important because we are adopting current language as opposed to some of our other modifications we made throughout this process where we said we would follow Ohio Revised Code. I believe the motion as it stands is to adopt this
Nobody has
current
that.
language, not to state that we will forever follow Ohio Revised Code, with the exception of the 10%.
So that's was this. So it will still stand that it's at 10% of the number of persons voting at the last preceding municipal election.
Yes.
Would that be part of the language that you are
That the code says.
modifying using the Ohio Revised Code, though?
I'm sorry, run that by me again. I'm sorry, I was looking.
If you were borrowing their language, but striking 15% to keep our 10,
Right, correct.
we want to update that language,
Right.
correct?
Yes, correct.
Madam Chair, for clarity, the motion was to simply substitute the number. I think the motion, you would still change the language.
Right, that's how we will
To-
draft it, is use the language in the Ohio Revised Code, but change the number to 10%.
Which you seem to be in favor of.
Well, I have no, that's a policy
Well,
decision, but
right,
I just
okay.
wanted to warn the commission that there can be litigation over the subtle difference between those two ways of counting.
So this would be, that it would include that, it would not change the improvement. It would, yeah, thank you.
Call the question, please.
You have clarity, ready to vote?
So it would be adopting A and B in place of paragraph 2 after the first sentence, except for the 10% would remain the same. Yes will be in favor of this change, no will be against the change. Jennifer Ashburn,
Yes.
Mary Ann Barney,
Yes, Baxter.
Baxter. I'm sorry, I knew her in high school. Abby Bemis,
Yes.
Diane Corso,
Yes.
Adriana Guerra,
Yes.
Billy Hill,
Yes.
David Miller,
Yes.
Mark Pfeiffer,
Yes.
Tim Schwanger,
Yes.
Elizabeth Sembler,
Yes.
Tom Shara,
Yes.
Jennifer Torres,
Yes.
Levada Wilson,
Yes.
Mike Zuloff,
Yes.
pass.
Continuing, section 67, notice.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Zulap.
motion to leave it alone.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Mr. Hastings, I'm struggling again. Why is this one 15%? Excuse me if that's an obtuse question, but why?
Yeah, that, it seems like a real inconsistency in our charter, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We ought to amend this one to 10% as well.
They are referring to the same
Yes.
persons, correct? Okay. And so we would want to potentially modify this to not only be 10%, but use the same language around who.
Yes.
Okay. My vision is not that good.
Don't
Just
blame
because
me.
of glare.
Don't
Just
blame
'cause
me,
of
I'm
glare.
retired. It was when I was.
It was excellent.
Outstanding.
It was.
That's right.
Okay. So there's we've had a motion and a second to leave the same.
Was it a second?
Was there?
Yes, there was.
Yeah, I second.
So that's
Yeah,
why we're
what I-
discussing.
That's what I thought. And the problem with the motion is,
Well, these sections are, I mean, if I were to literally read the charter, it instructs you to get at least 10% of the number of people that voted in the last election. But then the finance director has to certify that the petition contains at least 15% of the number of persons voting in the last election. So I guess it's possible you have a sufficient petition to submit to the finance director, but she can't approve it unless she gets that extra 5%.
I mean, I offered the motion just to get going on it because I really didn't even, yeah, so would 10% fix it?
Yes, and we'll change the other language too, of the, to the
Just
Ohio
amend his-
Revised
Can you
Code.
just amend his
Yep.
motion?
Would it be consistent to amend the motion to leave it alone except for the 10%?
And adopt the Ohio Revised Code description of,
Of the number of voters.
Oh, motion to amend the motion to simply make such changes to 67 to make it consistent with the prior motion.
Second.
Discussion.
Mr. Swanger.
Mr. Zloff, do we also want to take the city treasurer out of this section? And
I was hoping not to get into the weeds with it and let the law department clean it up for us.
I don't know how you would,
Yeah, no, you have to
able to
make a decision
continue
on that.
without-
Do you want the Board of Elections to do it? Do you want the city treasurer to do it?
Madam Chair, is there a cost
You started this,
if the
Schwanger.
Board of
Well, it
Elections
has
do
to go through our city treasurer does not keep a record of who
Right.
voted in the last
Right.
election.
Right.
And somebody has to look at the signatures of the people who voted in the last election and decide that they match the signatures on this
Exactly.
petition.
So it already has to be
And so
done
it
at the Board of
already has to
Elections.
go to the Board of Elections.
Well, that would be consistent with my motion to amend if we made that all consistent.
Okay. We'll take the treasurer out. I'm sure she'll be pleased.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Miller.
I'm getting more and more confused. It was my initial comment about the consistency between those two numbers. But when I read those and reread them again this afternoon, it seemed to me the whole purpose of all that gobbledygook was that it had to take the original petitions of 10% and post them all these places and get people to subsequently sign so that it actually took 15% in order to recall somebody. And I may have just made that up, but that's what I got out of reading it, that when it's posted at the fire departments and people go in and sign and then they come back, now there has to be 15%. So the 10 has to swell to 15 before you can actually recall somebody. Call me crazy, but
No, that's exactly right. But if we take out the posting at the fire department stuff, which we've already done,
that's why I was saying, those
Yeah.
two gotta be done together to understand what we're doing.
So the current motion on the floor would be to modify section 67 to take the petition to the Board of Elections to evaluate 10% and change the number of persons to match the Ohio Revised Code language. Any further
Madam Chair,
discussion?
that would be the effect. The motion was to simply ask the law department to make it all consistent.
Apples and oranges.
I
Works for
think,
me.
unless you reread it.
So a vote in yes is to change it consistent with the Ohio Revised Code. A vote of no is to leave it as is, which wouldn't fit with the one before. Jennifer Ashburn,
Yes.
Mary Ann Baxter,
Yes.
Abby Bemis,
Yes.
Diane Corso,
Yes.
Adriana Guerra,
Yes.
Billy Hill,
Yes.
David Miller,
Yes.
Mark Pfeiffer,
yes.
Tim Schwanger,
yes.
Elizabeth Semler,
Yes.
Tom Sherrod,
Yes.
Jennifer Torres,
Yes.
Levada Wilson,
Yes.
Mike Zula.
Yes.
Pass.
Madam Chair. One additional note, Section 68, which is not on the agenda, but then there's a reference to the notice from the city treasurer, so we would then also seek to amend that as well. It would be a notice from the Board of Elections.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Zullo.
I'd make the motion that we ask the law department to bring along with all the prior stuff any niggling little corrections to ensure that these sections are all consistent with the original intent of updating the process.
Second. Is that a motion?
And a second?
assuming everyone is going to go with this, are there any abstain or no votes instead of calling the whole roll?
That's her good thinking.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Section 82, Amendment of Charter.
I move to keep it as it is.
A second.
Discussion?
Madam Chair,
Miller?
just a point to help me understand the language. In the first sentence, it has an and I'm not sure if that means an and or both things have to be true. And then assuming that's the case, when you get down to registration books at the last regular municipal election, is that the people who are registered and eligible to vote at that election, or who actually did vote? Because to me, it's not clear which of those, and equally it would apply to the general election. Is it registered voters or the people who actually voted in the previous election, as in the sections we were previously wrestling with?
Clarify that and/or spot. Because I think I saw that too when I was reading it
Yeah,
this afternoon.
right here, 82.
Okay, there you go.
Amendments to this charter may be submitted to the electors of the city by a two-thirds vote of the city commission and upon petition signed by. Sounds like that's both things.
I think it's both, yeah.
Tied and
All right, so then, if that's both things, then of the electors, and then you get to registered at the last election, not voted at the last election, or did they mean voted at the last election?
Is there a motion in there somewhere?
There's,
Yeah, the motion
The
was to
motion
leave it
is-
alone.
this is
Keep it the
discussion,
Yeah, this is discussion.
trying to clarify.
Madam Chair, David, which was that part where you were just reading? Was it at the very bottom
The
here?
first, yeah, the
Right,
first
and then,
sentence.
Somebody
and then you're talking about the poll and the
last-
registration book?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were talking about. Okay.
No, what did you say?
It is electric, yeah.
Or the
Tracy,
Thought?
see
So it
that
could
as
be anybody.
automatic?
This is interpreted as sort of a or. In other words, it says the amendments to this charter may be submitted by one way and by another way. By the two-thirds vote of the commission, or can be, or 10% of the electors of the city. And that's 10%, by the way, of all the registered voters, not of the people who voted in the last election. So
Right.
it's a little bit different.
Yep.
And then the part about the people that voted, that's the obligation of the clerk to send a mailer to each elector whose name appears upon the poll of the last regular municipal general election. So she doesn't have to mail it to, or whoever the clerk is, does not have to mail it to every registered voter, but would mail it to everyone who voted in the last general election. Although I suspect the city has the option to mail it to every single registered voter if it so wants to.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. Mr. Zohoff?
Yeah, I apologize, I was so focused on reading what it said, I might have missed a couple of things. Did I hear Mr. Miller point out that the 10% of the electors versus what we just talked about on the prior motion, the 10% of the number of votes cast?
Yeah, I was just, through you, Madam Chair, I was distinguishing two different cases of what they meant.
Right.
And the real point is Mr. Hastings' comment that the "and" is really an "and/or." That there's two ways to get it, not both are required, one or the other is required.
And
There's two commas, apparently, a comma before and,
Right.
a comma after and, that makes it an or.
because if the intent was or, I might ask, why didn't they say or? Not to be argumentative, but why didn't they just say or if they meant or? And does it make no sense to demand both conditions to move forward? Would love to hear a response to that.
Yeah, I think this is a matter of grammatical interpretation. It doesn't, what it says is amendments to the charter may be selected to the electors, and then it lists two examples, this example and that example.
I call the question, please.
Ms. Myers, could you please call the roll? As a reminder, the motion is to keep the language as is.
We're voting to,
Keep the language as is.
Not change.
So a yes would be as is, a no would be to change it. Jennifer Ashburn,
yes.
Mary Ann Baxter,
Yes.
Debbie Bemis,
Yes.
Diane Corso, Adriana Guerra,
Yes.
Billy Hill,
Yes.
David Miller,
Yes?
Mark Pfeiffer,
Yes.
Tim Amber,
Yes.
Elizabeth Semler,
Yes.
Tom Sherraw,
Yes.
Jennifer Torres,
Yes.
Laveda Wilson,
Yes.
Mike Zula.
Yes.
Pass.
Madam Chair, since we're on the subject, it's, I don't think it's terribly out of order. Because we're talking about review of the charter, or amendments to the charter, 87 says every 5 years, and I got to get this out here. I'd make the motion that we review the, because we have ample means to bring forth charter changes in other ways, I would suggest changing 87 to every 10 years instead of every 5 years. This is quite a process, and I question whether it's needed every 5 years. I know Oberlin does it every 10 years. I know other cities do it every 10 years. So the motion would be, shall we change it to every 10 years instead of 5 years?
Is that a motion?
Sure.
Hearing no second, we'll continue with our agenda items. Moving on to Section 2, Form of Government. Well, returning to Section 2, Form of Government. A few meetings ago, we heard a presentation and lots of background information, trends and options in regards to form of government. Now that committee members have had a moment to digest that information and consider your perspective, we'll return to discussion about any potential changes on this charter item.
Madam Chair, I have a motion to create a ward system, 4 wards, 3 at large.
Second.
Discussion?
Does this mean that both Section 2 and Section 3 are going to change? In Section 2, it says, "Who shall be elected at large."
Yes.
Okay, so we're voting
Yeah,
on both of them.
Yeah, this motion actually may be a little bit premature because it doesn't talk about wards at all, but it's Section 3 that talks about no wards.
Mhm. Okay.
Madam Chair, how would the wards be determined? Like, how would you determine where the 4
The sections
wards
are the sections, like what's the division?
Mr. Hastings, do you know how that process would work?
That's up to us. I mean, how we do it. We have the local self-control. We could charge the commission with creating the wards periodically, so we don't have what happened to England and rotten boroughs. We can charge, we can create permanent wards. Yeah, if we go to a ward system, there has to be a method by which the wards are created.
But
And that has to be described.
That's not up to us to do that. That's up to the city commission to do that.
You can, the charter could say that it's up to the city commission to create the wards, yes.
Madam Chair, previously when this was brought up, I think there was a map drawn up that could probably give us a little bit better reference to how they had it when it was actually taken to the ballot once before.
I'm not aware of a map, but I'm new here, so I don't know.
Well, it was actually brought to the ballot once before, so there was a map.
Yes, that's right, the creation
Yeah,
of a
it was
ward
map.
system.
So that's what I'm saying. I don't know how we keep our records when it comes to things like that, but to see if we could possibly, so however was drawn up before then, I'm sure we can do the same thing.
This was taken to the ballot recently, correct?
Yes.
By
It
petition?
lost by,
And it failed?
yeah, 67%, I think it
Considerably.
was, something like that, yeah.
Madam Chair, was it to do what he was saying, that the commissioners would determine the wards, or was it brought to ballot to have us determine the wards?
It was not the charter committee that made the recommendation. I believe the last charter committee did not make the recommendation for wards.
It was by
It
petition.
was by
It
petition.
was by petition, yeah, in 2022.
Looks like, yes, it was a proposal to move to 4 ward and 3 at large.
It is by petition.
Like we were talking about with the 10% number of people who signed to then put it on the ballot.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Zulhofer?
did that initiative petition not specify the wards?
I do not know.
I believe it did.
I didn't hear you.
What did he say?
I don't have a record of that.
Didn't hear you.
Yeah,
It would be
that's-
difficult to imagine that being can't imagine that would be physically placed on a ballot. So they're just in voter education would have proposed how
Yeah,
the wards would appear?
Yeah, the language we have that shall go to this system, I presume that left it up to the city commission to create the wards if it was in the charter.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I'm hearing that I wasn't heard. So I made the mistake of speaking into the microphone. It's my understanding that, to the best of my recollection, the proposed charter change by initiative petition specified the wards, where they would be.
Madam Chair.
You need to speak into the microphone. This is
Yeah, I can't
being
hear you now.
televised.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Schwanger?
First time on mic.
I don't
Probably not.
I don't believe that it designated the wards per se. It said 4 wards and 3 at large. Okay, I don't think it said, laid the boundaries out like this street, this street, this street, and this street.
And
I
no
have-
process for determining the wards?
It said 4 wards and 3 at large, and then typically, maybe the law director can correct me if I'm wrong, typically, wards are created based on population.
Yeah, if the language I have in my chart here had passed, my legal opinion would be up to the commission must select 4 wards.
Right.
And that's how, I presume they would try to make them of equal population.
Unless you think that we should have specific wording in the change that it shall be created by population, each ward.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, well,
I have
population.
the floor right now, Mike, if you don't mind.
Well, there ought to be a period, like in the U.S. Constitution. The members of the House of Representatives are designated every 10 years based on the United States Census. So every 10 years, the United States goes through some states gain representatives, some states lose them, and then new districts are drawn based upon the census. Of course, the census is the most accurate way of determining who lives where, and we would have access to that data. So maybe if we were to do this, we would charge the commission with reevaluating the boundaries every 10 years when the U.S. Census is published.
Because I don't think maybe somebody can correct me again, but I don't see a lot of population shift from one area of town to another. Now, that's not to say we can't look at that if this goes through every 5 years. But I don't see it like the state of Ohio where you have whatever. I don't see a big population shift here every year or every 5 years. Now, also going to section 2, which was Mr. Hill's motion, it does mention in section 2 that they shall be elected at large. So that section would also have to be changed to accommodate a ward at large system, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, both would have to change, correct.
Okay. Okay.
The section that talks about, they both say 7 electors of the city elected at large. If we went to a ward system, and again, I would hesitate to include language, they must be equal, because equal means equal. Does that mean we split a ward down the middle of a house so that, one is exactly equal to the other? Sometimes you want wards to be separated by street boundaries or other things based on approximate equal population.
Sure. And typically, that's how they're set up.
Yes, that is how they're set
streets.
up in other cities, yes.
Streets, correct. I don't have anything further at this time, other than the fact that I'm going to remind everybody here, and I think Mr. Pfeiffer's reminded us before, all we're doing here is we're recommending to the city commission. They have the authority to say yes or no like they have in the past.
Correct.
So let's all try to keep that in mind, that just because we recommend it, if we
Does not mean it's going to go on the ballot.
if we disagree with wards, all we're doing is sending it on to a higher authority to say yes or no.
Right.
And then they're going to send it on to a higher authority to say
Right.
yes or no.
Right, and then you're free to try another petition if that's what you want to do.
Well, since you brought that up, 2 more minutes. The petition, I think I've said it before, that the opposition, which included city officials without any names, they spent $30,000 to defeat that change, and the city commission sent out a letter that each one of them signed, except for one commissioner, that explained to the electorate why wards are such a bad idea. And that should have never happened, and it shouldn't happen again. The letter that they're sent is supposed to just include the language of the proposed changes, not their opinions on that change. And hopefully that never happens again.
Madam Chair, I do have 2 questions, Mr. Hastings. What if we would go with the ward system and there is no one running from a particular ward? Like, will this language somehow address that? And in section 70 of our charter, you have to fill the vacancy. So we're going through all these.
That's right. If we don't do anything, I would refer to the fill a vacancy. Obviously, there's no one that came in second place, so you go right to the commission appointing.
So what do you do if nobody runs? You
The commission would appoint.
appoint?
Well, to further explain
Madam
that-
Chair.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Well, I need to answer her question.
Well, Madam Chair,
Mr. Schwanger.
The appointment would come from an individual that lives within that particular ward. They could not appoint a commissioner that did not live in that ward. Just to make that clear, I just wanted to.
But I'm just wondering, what if nobody wants to do it? Then what do? You have a vacant seat? I just don't know.
No, you would have a vacancy.
Then what would you do if nobody is running?
The city commission would take names of people that live in that ward, and then they would fill that vacancy until the next election. That's what other communities do. To me, it's not rocket science. I mean, we're not the first community that wants, is wanting to go to a ward system. It's very well documented. I think Mr. Hastings mentioned once before, if we did not have this, that the default is a ward at large system.
Madam Chair, just to give a little.
Mr. Hill,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Zulhoff, did you have something?
I don't see how we've answered the question on how to determine wards, other than saying, we've suggested that we could leave it to the city commission to create 4 wards. The problem with that is it invites an incumbent commission to do anything they want with it. They could create 3 wards with 1 voter in it. Without some specification of perhaps as equal as practicable, or, and some, as we know from Ohio history, some prohibition of gerrymandering in some way, shape, or form, you have a can of worms in the districting. Just wanted to point that out. Now, but I think the motion doesn't even address it. The motion is simply to go to 4 wards.
4 wards, 3 at large.
So without an amendment, could we read back the motion to move us forward?
Mr. Hill,
What was he asking again?
for you to repeat your motion.
My motion is to create a city that is serviced by 4 wards, 3 at large.
And under that current motion, the agreement would be that the city commission would determine how wards are established. Did you have anything else, Mr.?
That wasn't the original motion.
That was not the original motion, but it was clarification from the law director as to what might happen if that were placed on the ballot.
I believe that was the original motion.
That was the original motion. That was my original motion.
Okay, so effectively, the motion is for the 4 wards, and the city commission would create those wards.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Hill?
I believe Ms. Hastings answered that question. It's usually based on population, and of course, who's ever going to come up with the particular map and the scheme based on the streets and how it's going to be set up. Possibly, yes, it could be done by the city commission, but I believe what Mr. Hastings said, it's broken down, wards are broken down, so it's an equal population, correct?
Yeah, every city I know that has wards, they typically try to make them a relatively equal population. But there are instances where railroad tracks, rivers, lakes, make natural boundaries so that one ward is almost by practicality has to be smaller than another ward. And some neighborhoods have enough of a cohesion to them that presumably the commission members would know that it makes sense for this area of the city to be one ward as opposed to this area over here.
Madam Chair?
And to also, being very in tune with the city, I was very aware of what happened at the previous time when it came up on ballot. If you're really in tune with our city, it is not going to be an issue to have individuals run for those positions. It's going to be very easy. One thing that I did prior to coming to this and agreeing to this, I went through our entire city and driven around. A great deal of our citizens are feeling like they're being left out. One very nice community, which is Larchmont. And when you ride Larchmont, that is one of the nicest communities as far as if it's rental or if it's owned and they actually owner occupied. Very beautiful neighborhood, but it's not being serviced. I mean, we're patching it up, a little sidewalk here, sidewalk there. It didn't get the attention that Meg Street got. If it got the attention that Meg Street got, I could be from not just the Justice Center all the way down. There are dilapidated homes there, and you really don't see them because the streets look so good. That is one reason why, if you really think about our community, if you guys really just take your time and ride around and take a look, we're not servicing the entire, in certain areas of our city. When we have the ability to do it, that brings people back to our city. That brings people that want to move back here, creates jobs when they move here and they live here. And it's just something really to think about. But as far as the ward system, once again, I think I clarified it. I'm suggesting the amendment have a 4-ward system, 3 at large.
Ms. Corso?
Madam Chair, I guess my question would be, does our population size bear the number 7, regardless of whether or not it is a ward system or a non-ward system, based on other variables and things that I've looked up in regards to how many commissioners or representation there is based on population size? So I guess I would throw that out there as well.
Madam Chair. So, as my ongoing theme, the task of this committee isn't to solve all these problems we're talking about in detail. It's to make a recommendation to the commissioners to consider putting this idea out to the population to vote on it. There seems to be enough interest in that possibility. We're not deciding anything except, hey, do we want to give the people of Sandusky another chance to look at this and maybe make that change? All the detail, and I appreciate and respect so much the passion and the interest that you have, but in the interest of what we're really here to do, I would like to call the question, if I may. Keeping in mind that all we're doing is giving the commissioners a chance to look at it and decide, and then potentially the people in Sandusky.
Madam Chair, I find myself increasingly confused with what we're voting on, and I don't see how anyone is doing any better than I am on where we are and what we're voting on. And by the way, one member, you understand, of course, sir, that one member can't force a vote. The technical way to do it is that the body votes on whether to suspend debate and vote, but informally, it's just fine. I'm just saying, as long as you understand that one member can't simply demand that we vote.
I just
Thank
think
you.
that we did. One can do it because I did it.
Well, because
Mr.
everybody
Zoloff, let's
acquiesced.
continue, or I will call it to vote.
Yeah.
Do you have a further point to make?
But my concern is that I don't know what we're voting on, and I did ask for a
Motion
I did ask for a read back on the motion, and I don't think I got it.
I'll
He
say it
repeated
again.
I would disagree. The current motion is to replace at-large with 4 wards and 3 at-large,
Period.
period.
Thank you.
Is there time for amendment?
Well, you're obviously not acquiescing to suspending the debate. My point of order, thank you very much.
I thought the question was called.
Well, no, but he's right.
Yeah.
Vote to call the question.
Yeah, you have to vote at calling the question, you're right. You're right, so I'm
If you have more to say, you have the right to say it.
Myers, could you please call the roll?
Here, that's awesome.
Yes will be for the ward system. No will be to keep it as it is. Jennifer Ashburn,
Yes.
Mary Ann Baxter,
Abstaining.
Abby Bemis,
No.
Diane Corso,
Abstain.
Adriana Guerra,
No.
Billy Hill,
Yes.
David Miller,
Yes.
Mark Pfeiffer,
Yes.
Tim Schwanger,
Yes.
Elizabeth Semler,
No.
Tom Shara,
No.
Jennifer Torres,
Yes.
Levada Wilson,
Yes.
Mike Zuloff,
Yes.
eight. So 8 from 14, that would be a pass, correct?
Yes, pass. 8-4 is a vote.
So that in effect would be modifying section 2 and 3. Do we need a second vote, or what is the current motion sufficient to
Yeah,
modify?
this
both?
vote would be on whether or not we're going to change to the word system.
Okay, so it would modify section 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Should we discuss section 3 if there's any additional changes?
No, the question has been called. That was the vote.
Section 5, vacancies.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Schwanger?
It's one of mine that I put on for further discussion, and it comes with probably the sentence, the fifth one down, where it mentions the highest candidate at the last election shall be chosen, in so many words. And then after that, it states that we will not continue down the list, that the city commission will be the body that will make the selection appointment. And what I was asking for is a motion to change it whereby if the first person is not willing to serve, that we would continue down the list of folks that did not win in the election. So if you have 5 people that ran for city commission for 3 spots, somebody stepped out, they would ask the next highest vote getter, and if they said no, or if they moved out of town, it would go on to the next highest vote getter, and so on, and so on, and so on. And that's my motion.
I second it.
Discussion?
Through you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Miller?
What if there was someone on the ballot not selected to be elected, not the first runner-up, but a second runner-up that was of generally renowned dubious character, felon, pedophile, whatever? Would this charter change then mean that we would be obligated to select somebody that the electorate chose not to put in office, not by a little bit, but by a lot? I mean, that's the slippery slope I would see if we go down that road.
That is also my fear, particularly in a worded system.
Madam
Could
Chair,
end up with very few votes. Mr. Hill?
just the wording that was just said, our country's been ran by a felon. So I don't think that we can.
I don't think we
Yeah, I don't think that we can, no matter how we look at it, that, I'm just being straightforward. We're the city of Sandusky, we're talking about the United States of America. So,
see the irony.
yes, definitely. Right? Definitely. So when it comes to that, I think that equally, anyone can have a passion to run the city of Sandusky just as well as anyone can have a passion, whether or not they have a felony background or whether or not if they have a non-felony, because guess what? You're sitting next to them. No, I'm just saying, and I just be honest, I have a passion, all right? So, and I'm not ashamed of my past. A very good passion. That's why I said, me and Mr. Orzak have had bumped heads many times. So, but I have not like that, but I've had a passion. And I'll tell you, I've changed my life. Single dad, raised my kids, had custody of 3 of them. One's turning 18 tomorrow. Hey, so you can change your life. So I think, and even making that particular statement, that puts us in a legal situation if we turn down a felon when we have a president of the United States running. That's 34 counts. That's quite a bit.
Any other input or discussion on the proposed change? Regardless of the example, my opinion is more due to the fact that I think you could wind up appointing a candidate, selecting a candidate who is not favored by its community, particularly with our current recommended change. Could you call the vote, please?
Yes would be in favor of the motion to continue down the line of the electorate. for commission position.
Not worded exactly that way, but yes, that was my intent.
Yes. Jennifer Ashburn,
Yes.
Mary Ann Baxter,
No.
Abby Bemis,
No.
Diane Corso,
No.
Adriana Guerra,
No.
Billy Hill,
Yes.
David Miller,
No.
Mark Pfeiffer,
No.
Tim Schwanger,
Yes.
Elizabeth Semler,
No.
Tom Shara,
No.
Jennifer Torres,
No.
Levada Wilson,
Yes.
Mike Zuloff.
No.
Motion fails.
Madam Chair, I make motion to leave it as is.
For a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I didn't hear it.
The motion would be to leave it as is. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Madam Chair, you have to make a call.
Oh, motion
Failed.
passes.
Passes, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
We're just chilling.
Okay. Any items of old business? This would be a time to mention any sections that we also need to consider at our next meeting.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Schwanger.
For one moment, back on vacancies, I'd like to make a second motion to strike the very last paragraph where it says the Civil Service Commission would make the selection. I think we have enough language there that indicates the city commission would make the appointment if we need to have a replacement city commissioner. I've gone through a number of charters, and I don't see any charters where the Civil Service Commission is even mentioned as.
Yeah, I agree that I have not seen this provision, but what most charters, there does have to be something else. Most charters would revert to the judge, senior judge of the Court of Common Pleas.
Okay.
Because with one commission member absent, you have a potential for a tie. And then, actually, the city of Cleveland Heights, I think, could not select a replacement member. I think it was for more than a year.
Okay.
Because they couldn't break their tie. And their charter did not have a way of breaking the tie.
I'll withdraw my motion.
So this is a way of breaking the tie.
Any other items of old business? Items of new business?
Adjourn.
Motion.
That's my job.
I know. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Almost let you down here, huh?
You did.
Yeah, it's terrible.
No, he wasn't even close to letting you down.
She got him.
Yep, that's fine, thanks. Thank you.
Well, I'm missing the next one. I'm gonna be away, so.
Oh, man.
You guys.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Terrible.
To Northern California, you know, the redwoods, where all like the giant trees are.